The next item is number 9, the draft CHNEP 2025 CCMP. And that will be presented by Dr. Jennifer Shafer from Shafer Consulting. Okay, the purpose is to provide an overview of the updates on the CHNEP CCMP and how committee member input has been addressed and whether this committee recommends policy approval of the updated draft. And this relates to all of the priority actions from the CHNEP CCMP plan. Thank you. Take it away.
Jennifer, if you don't mind, is this too dark if we dim the lights? Okay, we just thought it might make it easier for people to see the slides.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity to bring you the final draft 2025 CCMP update. Jennifer Shafer, Shafer Consulting. It was our privilege to put together the 2019 CCMP. You're probably familiar with this beautiful coffee table book, which sits on the desk of every policymaker in the region. And this is what we're updating today. This, as Jennifer alluded, was definitely a team effort. My partner, David Shafer, the CHNEP staff, all of you have provided very excellent input to allow us to really dig in and fully update the CCMP. So my challenge today is to tell you in a short amount of time what we did to update the 200-page strategic plan. And I will do so in a presentation, maybe 35 minutes or so. And then we'll have a balance of, I think, an hour if you want it to have discussion about the changes that were made. I welcome your points of clarification to the presentation, but if it seems like it's a more meaty discussion item, let's save that till I finish in about 35 minutes. So my strategy for presenting this to you in the way that we can all sort of digest it in a short amount of time, if we first sort of provide the highlights. What's new? Overall, what were the types of things that we updated and changed? Then I'm going to go into a series of sort of gnarly bulleted slides where I'll tell you specifically how we addressed your comments that you provided to the team at the last meeting, the last cycle. We will discuss how we address some of the major staff comments as well as your comments. And at that point, you can actually follow along. We have a detailed comment response document. This is in your packet. And on the far right-hand column, you'll see there's a column titled origin of comments. And those comments that came from the management committee are clearly marked. I'll be focusing on those. But there's a lot of other stuff that got updated as well. There's probably not a single page of this 200-page document that didn't get some kind of facelift. And so I'm going to also highlight some of the changes that we made that we thought were particularly interesting or exciting. There's been a lot of progress over the last 5 years. Things have changed in the scientific world, the policy world, the management world, and so we want to bring some of those highlights here at attention. Okay. Just for a high-level overview of where we are, we've been working over the last couple of months to put this update together based upon your comments from the last cycle. Now we're bringing it through the management conference again, indicating how we address those comments. Next, once the policy committee has weighed in, it will be sent off to EPA and posted for public comment. Those comments will be collected and incorporated, and we will bring it back to you one more time in the next cycle in December and January, after which all final changes will be incorporated and we will proceed to the graphic design and layout phase. So this has been a highly compressed timeline relative to the original, which took several years. And so we've been hard at work making sure this can be truly the 2025 update. Again, as an overview, to remind you of what's in this strategic plan. All NEPs around the country are required to have one of these strategic plans. They're known as the Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan for the NEP, CCMP. The CHNEP CCMP has 4 chapters, 4 action plans around water quality improvement, hydrologic restoration, fish and wildlife habitat protection, and public engagement. And it's organized like a strategic plan. It's hierarchical. There's a vision, there's a goal, there's objectives, there are actions, activities with metrics, et cetera. So I just want to remind you and point out that when I refer to sort of codes or numbers, it's in this sort of hierarchy. And so across our 4 action plans that I just mentioned, there are 15 actions, and these actions are sort of represented as little mini chapters, and then 32 activities nested within those 15 actions, where additional detail on how to carry out and accomplish that action are detailed. And this is all prescribed pretty much by EPA. So we look to make sure you can check all the boxes with the types of things that the EPA would like to see in these management plans. All right, so again, sort of a high level, what did we change? What are the kinds of things that were updated throughout? The strategic framing was updated based upon your input and the growing importance of bioindicators, for example, as a complement to chemical and physical parameters. We've added some framing around bioindicators. We have added some framing around nature-based solutions. And by framing, I mean, these are sort of the overarching paradigms with which we will apply the work of the CHNEP. Data updates. Everywhere there was data that was open source data, either in a text, in a table, or in a figure, we went back to those data sources and updated them. New science and policy, where there were new findings, important publications, where there were new Florida statutes or implementing Florida Administrative Code. We try to catch all that and update that information. Projects and programs. In each chapter, we try to highlight what the management conference as a whole has been up to. And so the kinds of things we updated include all the new stormwater retrofit projects, the septic conversion projects, the wastewater treatment upgrade projects, the land conservation projects, restoration projects, et cetera. All those lists have been updated. Accomplishments, looking at overall what the conference has accomplished, as well as specific to the CHNEP staff work. We incorporated and updated all that. And finally, as a sort of overview, we did add, based upon recommendations coming out of the management conference, we added 5 new activities. And again, if you'll refer to your meeting packet, the 5 new activities are pulled out and detailed in your handout titled CHNEP CCMP 2025 New Activities. I will point out during the presentation where these new ones were added. And this perhaps could be part of our discussion if you have any comments about these new activities with regard to how they're framed, who the responsible parties are, et cetera. Okay, so I don't expect that you can read this, but it's an example of the graphic design work that we do in order to kind of turn bulleted lists of things into something visually compelling. So this is what the timeline milestones for the program. We've updated that from 1970 to 2024, working with staff to pick out what are some of the really sort of earth-shattering things that mark the history of the program. Similar graphic, sort of collapsing down a whole bunch of bulleted lists of accomplishments into a graphic that's a little more appealing. for the reader. And again, these are detailed in the text. The CHNEP Water Atlas has a number of accomplishments and new tools, new data, et cetera. And so we collapsed all of that into an easy to read infographic, for example. All right, this table shows the figures in the CCMP that were updated or in some cases deleted. On the left-hand side is the figure number. This is the original figure number from the 2019 version. The sort of short title of what's shown in that figure, and then the right-hand column shows how that figure was revised or updated. If the data in the figure was updated or updated, that is shown with the citation. For example, the paired water CMDLs and BMAPs were updated with the latest FEP data on their open source platform. Probably the most notable change that came from updating these data came from the ongoing updates that FPOH is doing to the septic location database. They have a statewide database and they obtain data from the counties to indicate what properties are on central sewer versus septic system. And we originally published 2018 data in the 2019 CCMP, that's shown on the left. And a number of counties throughout the CHNEP area have had data updates. And so when we grab all that new data, there's quite a few more dots on the map. I'd also like to point out that they have added a new category, known, likely, or somewhat likely. So there's still a lot of uncertainty in this data set. And in particular, I also want to point out some of the dots you see on the map aren't actually built yet, but they may be permitted and unbuilt. In any case, there's hotspots throughout the CHNEP area for septic systems. Okay, this is the table updates. Again, left-hand column, the original table number. You can see there are two new tables that we've added related to the Florida Stormwater Rule load allowances, as well as a new study by Cortez et al. 2020 on the economic values of the CHNEP watersheds by basin. And similarly, on the right-hand column, you'll see where the data was updated from. And in several cases, we've added new data from Glades and Henry County, which joined the program sort of at the tail end of the last update. So everyone's in the family now. So I'm going to go through a series of slides, 2 slides for each of the 4 action plans. So bear with me, it's a little numbing, eye numbing. And we're going to go through each action plan. First slide is going to show you how we address your comments as well as significant major staff comments for that action plan. Then the second slide is going to be the highlights. We'll do that 4 times. So starting with the water quality action plan. Here we, based upon your recommendation, we added new content related to resilient systems approach. So really emphasizing that we're in a time of change and all management solutions need to be designed to be resilient and within that sort of resilient approach paradigm. And sort of similarly and related, that many of the solutions that have multi-benefits, co-benefits, are nature-based solutions where we can utilize the power of the system services from nature itself, help solve management problems. We also added a section on bioindicators. This is a growing importance to the paradigm of how we can evaluate ecosystems, not just through physical or chemical parameters, but also looking at the function and structure of the biological systems. And in fact, this is sort of a major, I'd say, not paradigm shift, but paradigm addition. And so we include a section on bioindicators in all of the management chapters where it's relevant. Okay, looking at specific actions, WQ3, which is the action on stormwater improvements. We added and expanded the section on the state stormwater rule. Last time around, this was still in process, had been for some time. So we're excited to report that it has been passed and adopted. And as I mentioned, we added a table also indicating what the new nutrient reduction limits are. In WQ4, which is the wastewater section, at your suggestion, we added a stronger recommendation that wastewater and stormwater improvements be more resilient to climate change. So building in that resilience to the project design from the very beginning, and again, looking at co-benefits, co-solutions of wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. In WQ4, we also updated activity 1.4, and this is a minor update to just tweak the wording a little bit to caution that although the promotion of reuse water is a great solution to help restore hydrology, we have to be mindful that some water treatment plants are still producing reuse water that have high nutrient content. So just being a little more aware of that and collecting caution about using that as appropriate, making sure it's not draining into primary water bodies. WQ5, reducing harmful algal blooms and macroalgae. I would say this one was almost a total rewrite. So much more new information, both scientific information and management information. At your suggestion, we sort of expanded the discussion to include not just the interaction of nutrients with harmful algal blooms, but also bringing into the picture the role of climate in making those conditions more difficult to manage, as well as the role of macroalgae, which are themselves can be sources of nutrients if a event causes a widespread loss of macroalgae. All those nutrients can be dumped into the water body pretty quickly. So it's just more of a comprehensive discussion, as well as a modification to activity. No, actually a new activity, WQ 5.2, which we've added, which came at the suggestion of the conference to add an activity related to best practices and technologies to reduce or mitigate HAB impacts. Of course, first thing we say is it's best to reduce nutrient sources when possible, but if the HAB strikes, there are mitigation measures that the CHNEP can help to support and coordinate. Other highlights across the Water Quality Action Plan. First, Hurricane Ian was a big deal, huge deal, devastating impact. So we make sure to chronicle that, as well as describing CHNEP's important role in contributions to disaster response in bringing parties together and helping fund and manage data collection post-storm and bringing federal resources and attention to the area. The new CHNEP Water Atlas, I'm calling it sort of 2.0, is such a major revision with all kinds of new tools, new pages. You'll hear a presentation on that a little bit later today, but that's definitely a highlight, a much more engaging and informative and we hope functional tool for the conference to use and the public as well. SWIFMUD has updated the swim plan for Charlotte Harbor. That's a major accomplishment. The Florida Department of Agricultural and Consumer Services, their Office of Agricultural Water Policy, under the Clean Water Act, actually has upgraded their farm inspections and reporting protocols so that every farm in the state that is enrolled in the Farms BMP program has to be visited and inspected at least once every 2 years with detailed reporting on their best management practices, where they might be falling short, what their nutrient application rates are. So much more focus and sort of disciplined attention on that. I mentioned the updates to the statewide septic system database coming in from the various counties. And I believe that those updates will be ongoing. I think it's sort of meant to be a living database. So as the uncertainty drops, hopefully we'll finally be able to kind of focus on a final number and location for those. The water management districts reported in their water use reports that for the 2040 projections of water use, they'll anticipate a 90% increase in the use of reuse water, which will result in a 99% reduction in surface water discharges. So that's good news with the caveat about the nutrient-laden reuse water. And then finally, a really important update to our understanding of the relationship between anthropogenic nutrients and harmful algal blooms, in particular red tide. There have been several scientific publications that have come out recently. Miles et al., Beck et al., Damasco et al. Steve Swall will be presenting on this later. Jennifer Hecker was a co-author of these, Lisa Damasco et al. And so it's really finally provided a statistical relationship, a statistical smoking gun, if you will, linking the nutrients coming off the land to exacerbated red tide. That was an important update. All right, next action plan. The hydrologic restoration action plan. Again, comments coming from the management committee have an asterisk, and I'm also sprinkling in a few substantive staff comments as well to tell you how we address. The first action for the hydrologic restoration action plan data and modeling. We added the information about the hydrologic modeling that's been completed for the Charlotte Harbor Flatwoods Initiative and the South Lee County Watershed Initiative, for accomplishment there. HR 2, which is about increasing freshwater and groundwater resources. On your recommendation, we added a section to really point out that we balance and promote hydrologic restoration projects as flood protection and as water supply protection. And so by emphasizing that hydrologic projects can help with flood protection, that makes them, we think, a little more amenable to public interest and funding, because it's protecting land and property as well as reaching ecosystem goals. Activity 2.2 was updated, and this was really to point out that although major landscape level hydrologic restoration is necessary, but it doesn't have to be large scale, that smaller scale sort of neighborhood, even backyard, LID type, low impact development type projects can also help recharge water as well. HR 3, which is to protect and restore natural flows. You could find these suggestions that hydrologic improvements and infrastructure be more resilient to climate change. There's a theme going on that was definitely on your mind last time, making sure that all these management projects have resilience built in. Activity 3.1 was updated in order to support floodplain connectivity and reduced stream channelization and fish passage barriers. This was really to emphasize that there is an important fish and wildlife component to hydrologic restoration, particularly with new science produced by FWC, showing the importance of some of these coastal ponds and tidal creeks. Activity 3.2 was updated, making the point I just made, which is to support limited estuary connections to coastal ponds for supporting fish populations, juvenile fish especially use these areas. It's a sort of early juvenile refuge. We also added, at your recommendation, a new activity, HR 3.3, which is to implement all of the vulnerability assessments that the recommendations coming out of all the assessments that the counties are doing, making sure that that is front and center, not just projects on a shelf. Some other major highlights. Hydrologic Restoration Action Plan. In SwiftMud's 2021 WACA update, that's the Southern Water Use Caution Area. They report that all 13 minimum flow levels are being met in the SWACA area for rivers, estuaries, and streams. Some of the lakes have not been met, but are still in process. There is a new Caloosahatchee River MFL that was adopted after many years of public input, scientific scrutiny, et cetera. So that's positive. And for the benefit of our charismatic megafauna, the manatees, I'm happy to report that the Warm Mineral Springs Creek restoration was completed, which helps out the manatee refuge in southern Sarasota County. All right, here we are with the third action plan, the Fish and Wildlife Habitat Protection Action Plan. In the intro, again, here we added a new section on bioindicators, carrying that sort of paradigmatic theme throughout the document. Under FW1, estuaries, we revised and expanded a section on clam restoration. Previously, we had just had one kind of generic section on bivalves with emphasis on oysters. So we broke it out and have also extensive information on the ongoing clam restorations. And how do you feel about that?
Clamtastic.
Yes. We also updated the recommendations for living shorelines as seawall alternatives, but also adding living shorelines to existing seawalls or hardened shorelines in order to soften those kind of on the green to gray scale of nature-based solutions. Let's see, we added the new work on the Tidal Creek Assessment Framework by Wessel et al. Again, Hecker was a co-author on this work, really trying to figure out how best to assess tidal creeks with regard to their health and other parameters that can be managed. We added a new activity at your suggestion. This is FW 1.3, and this one really mirrors FW 1.1, I think, which is about benthic habitats and seagrass. We added this one to ensure a focus on coastlines. So mangroves and salt marshes are natural living shorelines along coast, the coastal wetlands. Establishing biological indicators, testing changes from sea level rise and complexity. I welcome your scrutiny on this one during our discussion period. FW2, land and waterways. We revised the recommendations coming out of the HRN, or the Habitat Restoration Needs study at the time of 2019, phase 2, which incorporates the Caloosahatchee watershed and basin, had not yet been finished. So we merged it all together in one set of recommendations for where those priorities should be with regard to habitat restoration, habitat reservations, accounting for future sea level rise, and management solutions. And a new activity to ensure that there is focus on this habitat restoration needs plan for implementation. That's FW 2.3, new activity. And finally, FW3, assess and promote benefits of protection and restoration. We updated activity FW 3.1 to revise the performance measure here to provide technical support to advance the habitat restoration needs implementation. All right, highlights, exciting things happening in fish and wildlife habitat restoration. We reviewed the endangered species, the protected species list again, and saw that the Homosassa shrew has been state delisted. Yay, but the Atlantic sturgeon is now listed as federally endangered. Also sad news, there's been a loss of about 10,000 acres of seagrass since we last reported since 2014. And that has been a subject of much discussion, both in the text and through the management conference. We report on a expanded state crest restoration project in the Caloosahatchee. Right now, these are sort of in pilot phase, but they continue to receive funding with a number of implementing partners who are installing, monitoring, cleaning cages, et cetera. And so this could expand up to 100 acres if successful. Large-scale coordinated land conservation. This is another huge success where a lot of progress has been made in completing or coordinating all partners to contribute towards sort of large-scale goals, things like the Florida Wildlife Corridor and the brand new Everglades to Gulf Conservation Area, where certain organizations are taking the lead in providing sort of coordinating role so everyone can be on the same page with regard to restoration opportunities. In the CHNEP area itself, over 87,000 acres of conservation lands have been added since 2019, and hundreds of restoration projects. And another interesting statistic coming out of the Cortez report, $13.6 billion in economic regional benefits per year for the CHNEP area from the benefits coming from natural resources. But in a separate study, which we also cite, that value, approximately the same value, could be lost with another severe red tide event. Interesting that those are kind of on the same order of magnitude, annual benefits and potential losses. Right, coming in for a landing. This is the last action plan. This is the public engagement action plan. We, of course, updated the statistics on population growth for the region. And with this comes new opportunities to interact with new audiences. In PE1, which is about informing and engaging the general public, we updated activity 1.2 performance measure to specify that a monthly mass communication would go out about volunteer activities. So it's a slight shift in focus from just promoting CHNEP activities and instead collecting all management partner activities into a monthly email, sending that out to sort of synergize participation throughout the region. Strengthening partner collaboration, a new activity at your suggestion, PE 3.2, to convene and coordinate partners for post-disaster response. Hopefully there will not be another one in the next 5 years, but if there is, CHNEP stands ready to help coordinate partners once again in sort of amplifying the response and coordinating to that effect. And then finally, PE4, which is about increasing outreach to policymakers. We updated activity 4.1. The performance measure has been updated to include annual meetings with interested policymakers. All there to say about that. All right, other highlights from the Public Engagement Action Plan. We noted that the population of CHNEP area has tripled in the last 50 years. And by 2035, Polk County actually will be the most populous according to projections, edging just ahead of Lee County. The CHNEP web presence, including all of CHNEP's online channels and sites, has doubled over the last 4 years, more or less. So that's a major accomplishment. And also of note is the Southwest Florida Climate Summit, which CHNEP began organizing in 2021. It's held annually. Denver has asked you to save the date for February of 2025. And which will be the 5th annual summit. And so this is a really important ongoing event that CHNEP leads, which brings together not just practitioners and the public to interact, but also a typical lineup of power hitter speakers. So definitely worth that. And then finally, of note, CHNEP leverages about $1 federal funding into about $55 in restoration, thanks to the expanded partner investments from state, local, and private dollars. So definitely a value-added program. That is the end of my presentation, but I do want to engage you with some conversation and questions, comments. We've got, let's see, as much as 25 minutes if you want it. Yeah. So maybe what I'd like to do is put the lights back on, thank you, and then bring your attention to the new activities that have been added. This is in your packet, single sheet, double-sided. Scan that. If your organization is appropriately named, see if the intent of the activity seems clear enough. Give you a second to let that over.
I got a question for that list that you have here, the PE, public engagement, strength, nonprofit, activity 3.2, responsible parties. You have, I guess, but you don't have FEMA in that. It's addressing to coordinate natural disasters and episodic events, response and recovery efforts. But I don't see FEMA there. I wonder if it should be at least call them to be part of the party.
Yes, yes. Agree, Jennifer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. We're going to add FEMA to the list of responsible parties under activity PE 3.2. Thank you.
I mean, I think the reasoning though might be is that we were looking at CHNEP member organizations and making sure that, you know what I'm saying? And so FEMA,
Yeah, it's like, ask them if they want to be a responsible.
we haven't asked them.
Sorry.
I think it's a natural, but I do think that's why the thought process was like, it was the members that are active in CHNEP. Well, who would be responsible, but we could reach out to them and see if they have any concern with being added.
Brandon.
If I may, beyond that, and I know maybe we're kind of past the point of discussing language in here too, but that brings up sort of a point that kind of emerged with the EN response, and that, what FEMA does primarily is it's a lot of reimbursement for mitigation and remediation activities that had to be done in response to a major event. And part of that is doing things that qualify for that reimbursement for those mitigation activities. And this was an ongoing issue and conversation that we had that SWIFMUD's very aware of, and they've been trying to kind of lead the charge on at the state level, is making things like water quality monitoring and assessment one of the pillars in emergency response that could be eligible for reimbursement and direct funding. And that was something that we've been hitting walls in trying to achieve. And so, I'm wondering, again, it's probably too late to have that discussion in here, but maybe part of this really is also CHNEP assisting the folks at SWIFMUD and other entities to really push forward the need for this kind of response at the EOC level to get authorization for funding through EOC activities to do this kind of stuff. So, because that was our.
So we actually did work on that quite a bit after Ian trying to basically pitch the idea of a natural resource element being added to emergency response
Right.
plans, because part of the issue is like that, those plans are what direct where resources go, whether it be staffing or financial resources. And if there isn't a place in there that speaks to natural resources, including water quality, post-event sampling, which is one of the things we brought up to them, it doesn't have a home. It doesn't have a home to then when the emergency happens, they're going to follow their plan, and the plan doesn't have a section on that. So we did try to, we approached many different entities, including the regional planning councils and whatnot, to see if they would help us draft such a thing and try to promote getting those incorporated into the different various county emergency response plans. That was the avenue we were advised would be the most effective way of addressing that issue. But we do continue to work with FEMA. Like, we just had a meeting with them, and they're about long-term recovery, and they are still hearing our other ask, which was about providing technical community assistance specialists for support, staffing support to counties and cities, to go after funds, to manage funds, to get reimbursements. I mean, and obviously everyone knows it's a huge ordeal to try to deal with FEMA. And we thought that some of these counties and cities are just not positioned well with the human capacity to be able to take advantage of those resources. So we've been continually pushing that, and just had a meeting last week about it. And they continually say, it doesn't fit within the bureaucracy to fund people, apparently. So we've been going back and forth trying to figure out what avenue, and apparently there's an idea, and we had to write it up, send it to them to pitch the idea to a new group from FEMA who's looking at standing up a new long-term recovery office here in this region with staff. So we gave them our input as to how we think that would be effective, if they could even embed a couple of those staff with our staff, because we're already doing the comprehensive vulnerability assessments for the 10 counties. So there is work looking at some of these things that intersect with this. So anyway, long story short, is we continually try to push this, but we ourselves, Brandon, have just not had a lot of success getting traction to get this addressed. But we just, every chance we get, keep giving voice to these things. And we appreciate getting your input, because that helps us when we go to meet with these entities to try to relay what those concerns with us.
And just to add a couple things, and Brandon, to your question, so our district
after was from Debbie at the time, there was a impacts to Sarasota Bay. So we actually, DEP received a request from Sarasota County for same type of sampling. And so DEP then, through their EOC, and I don't know the exact process, so I'm kind of speaking very high level about it. But assigned it to our district along with the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program came out to help sample as well and paid for some of the sampling. Our district's intention is to apply for FEMA reimbursement, similar to we did after Hurricane Ian. It was not successful at that time, and I think they kind of dropped it. And, but the EOC, our district's EOC feels that they have potentially figured out maybe a way to seek reimbursement. So we have not been reimbursed yet, so stay tuned. We'll see if that is the case, and I can try to get some more information and bring that back if it is successful or what we encountered, and bring that to the table for discussion.
Yeah, that would be awesome, because I think that is the hurdle here, you know, unless CHNEP and kind of what they're thinking about doing is not just coordinating, but also providing some of that financial resource to make the sampling happen, then that's going to continue giving me, I think, the hurdle at the local level of actually making it.
One last thought on that is just like with Ian, we dealt with all this, you know, we worked heavily with Brandon and Charlotte County and other partners here at DEP, the water management districts. We were calling University of Florida, trying to piecemeal together resources. And of course, there's so many logistical hurdles, like we're government. We don't have like an emergency fund that we're just authorized to just dip into at a moment's notice. And so we even were calling Conservancy of South Florida to pay for lab samples as we were dropping them at labs. I mean, we were like just trying to figure out how to cover all the different things, but I think that that's what made us want to pursue, like, can't we put this in these emergency response plans to have a more thoughtful, you know, what's the plan of action, you know, and who will be responsible for what? And then I guess the other issue is like, how do you pay for that? Like, and the logistics of dealing with that. We just, you know, we can only go up to 20,000 between management cycles without work plan amendments to authorize us. So we did dip in as much as we could, but then we hit a wall of how much, I know need was greater than that. So it's definitely an issue. And like you have run into, I mean, we brought these issues to all the appropriate entities, but I think the bureaucratic constraints, we keep running into walls trying to figure out like how to actually make it happen.
And part of it is.
We'd love to hear what you find out.
Yeah, I will do some research and bring that back, and hopefully we've got a response of whether we're gonna be reimbursed for those activities. I know that Dr. Anastasio and Chris A. Had proposed a water quality portion at the governor's hurricane conference, some panel or discussion, and it was not picked up. And so we are trying to bring light to exactly what you're saying, this issue. I think some of it is that these are for environmental health purposes and not public health. And so there is a priority for the public health sampling. There is funding for that. And maybe that is some of what they figured out, is to tie some of that together, because they did some bacteria testing as well this cycle. And I don't know all the parameters from the beginning, from Ian versus what we did for Debbie, but I will certainly do some research, and I need to bring somebody from the EOC. You know, we could do that for the next meeting, and right, at least shed some insight into what the request was, how that worked.
So sorry, one more thing real quick, and to this task, maybe then, well, I guess for the same reasons we're not adding FEMA here, but like y'all described, but maybe Department of Health should be approached as a partner entity for this activity. Especially if the route that's going to go is like, what we're trying to do is get reimbursement because public health benefit, blah, blah, blah. DOH is usually the one that's on the front line. That sort of thing.
I think it's the same situation as FEMA, like we would need to reach out and especially ask if they want to be added in.
Sure.
I don't see that they probably would have any objection, but they're not members. So, and this is a strategic plan of the partnership member organizations, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So they're kind of external.
I got you.
to the partnership, but we can certainly reach out.
Sorry, before you go, is there anything actionable other than thinking about advocating that you yes, or is it more sort of a implementation?
This may be more of an implementation.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And under the responsible parties, DEP is listed twice. and
Oh.
Maybe they're extra responsible, but very minor. But
Got it.
a couple of questions maybe. So the PE3 is to strengthen nonprofit partner collaboration. But listed is also NGOs and private sector. So maybe, and this may be in the plan, we're just looking at a snippet of it here, but the definition of a nonprofit partner, or maybe it's just partner collaboration, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe just one comment related to HR, the vulnerability assessments. And just sort of questioning whether as I understand it, the vulnerability assessment is not required to provide the adaptation strategies. The vulnerability assessment then kind of feeds into an adaptation plan, which would actually set forth those recommendations. So I don't know if it's just the things that supporting the implementation of vulnerability assessments and adaptation plan recommendations, which I think are going to be the ways that those vulnerability assessments. Okay.
That was under which?
HR 3.3. So it would read activity 3.3, develop and support implementation of vulnerability assessment and adaptation plan recommendations. I wanted to point out one change that we made that didn't make it onto this. It's very minor. If you take a look at, let's see, FW3, 1.3. What I want to point out, you'll have to flip the page over to look for the 5-year performance measure for FW 1.3. It reads increased understanding of the status and trends. And I believe it was Ernesto who thought that was too wishy-washy. So we substituted the word documented instead of increased understanding. So we read documented status and trends of mangrove saltmarsh habitat.
Thank you.
Yeah, and similarly, that PE3 point that Viviana, I actually looked at the document and we had removed nonprofit and just, it did read in the actual document, strengthen partner collaboration. So I think we've already addressed that in the other document,
Wanted to say that the reason why I suggest that is because, yeah, you understood the message. It's like, okay, enough of this research and research. Implement.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Exactly. Thank you. Thank you for putting that. Just the language.
This agenda item is to hear your comments, your last word, at least until it's back again. But we are seeking your recommendation that your comments have been addressed to your satisfaction and that you support moving this on to the policy committee with your blessing.
I make just a few. This is my first meeting here, so admittedly, I haven't read through all of this, but a few things you said kind of were touch points for me. I come from a utility background, so I just want to touch on some of the OSTDS stuff. So I don't know if you're aware, but the Clean Waterways Act required all of the municipalities and counties within the VMAP to submit a OSTDS remediation plan by July 31st of this past year. So you should have a lot better data coming in because we had to supply where we suspected our OSTDS was. I think it's important to note that they asked the counties and cities to do that instead of the DOH because their information has been historically unreliable, as you're seeing in the change in the charts there. So I would expect a lot better data to be available if it isn't already. On page, I think it's like 73, you cited a study from Canada about nutrient reduction through OSTDS. Page 73.
Was it the clean version or the track change?
I was looking through
Traction.
the clean copy.
Oh, you,
Oh,
Yeah.
so 70,
73.
Yeah.
okay.
So I see Cooper 2016.
So I was referring to the, it says ourwatershed.ca. That may just be where you pulled the image from.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So at my time at DOH, that figure was historically like 21 to 25% reduction in TN. And I don't know if that's soil-based or high water table in Florida, but the studies that were done in Florida through FAWA, it was like a 21% reduction, not a 30 to 40. So I think it paints a better picture
Right.
for what you're trying to say, but I wouldn't use that number.
Is there any way that you could give us, like, just jot down the name of that so we can figure out how to find it, to cite it and all that?
I'll find it for you.
Yeah.
And that stat is one that we've cited pretty often. It comes from, his name, the godfather of,
Harvey Harper.
yes, comes from the Harper study. So you're saying there's.
But that's more stormwater.
This-
This is septic. And it looks like that, I mean, that the Canadian source is 30 to 40, but to your point, like if there's a more appropriate local study that shows less nutrient reduction,
Yeah, I think maybe.
it
the
would
FOSS
probably be a better source to cite.
Well, the statistic there is not cited from the webpage. That is a credit for the image itself.
Understood, yeah.
And we might have gotten that number from the researcher, what's her name? Does all of the septic stuff. You have my fist. Ringing a bell, anyone? Big deal, sorry.
Not a Gainesville?
Yeah, you know, shoot. Come to me once I sit down, but
Of course.
she has publications, recent publications about septic performance. Maybe where we got it from, but I'll track that down to give it the proper citation and correct the number if needed. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
no,
Talking about Mary Love.
Yes, bless. Thank you.
Oh, also, really quick, this is a small one, but on page 67, it refers to PFAS as an unregulated contaminant.
Oh,
EPA rules recently, took a couple of those off that list.
What page are you on?
67, it lists it just loops PFAS in with a few other unregulated contaminants.
Yeah, I'll move that out. We have an introduction to contaminants of emergent concern, which makes it very clear that EPA has recently indicated there are.
I think we just didn't catch that to update it. It looks like language that was in the original draft, that when it was unregulated.
Pretty recent.
So we can remove it from page 67, the reference there.
Thank you for that input.
Yeah.
Really good eye for detail.
Yeah.
Are there any more comments?
Anybody? It's the last one.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for your time and attention, for all the input you've provided us to make this go as smoothly as it can. Like Jennifer said, I think we're pretty proud of the depth that we were able to dig and get some really interesting updates in here. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.